ask your classmates to join the class, ma? It's already 10:06, right? Can you hear me? Please respond. Can you hear me? Am I audible? Yeah, okay, okay, ma. Jahnavi, please inform your classmates, ma, to join the class. Yes, ma. Let's wait for 2 more minutes. Then I will start the class, ma. Today. Yes, shall I start the class? So in the last class, we discussed about the process concepts, right? So we have seen what is a process, what are process schedulers, right? Process control block, like this. We have so many things about the process state, process states, right? High state model we have seen, right? And operations on the processes, like all these things we discussed in the last class, right? So today we will see about the process scheduling, right? So, why to schedule the processes, right? What are the different criterias uh, we use for scheduling algorithms, right? So, based on the system requirements, right? Based on the type of the system, we choose the scheduling algorithm, right? So, we have so many scheduling algorithms. So, we try to see the algorithms in today's class, right? So, let us start the class now. Can I please respond? I am audible, right? I am audible, and you able to get what I am telling you. Yes or no? Shall I start the class? Please respond. Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. So let's start with CPU scheduling. Yeah, right. So in this, we are going to learn about the basic concepts of CPU scheduling, what is the scheduling criteria and scheduling algorithms in today's class, right? So we may not complete all the algorithms, but we try to complete one or two based on the time. Why? Because so first 1 hour, I am going to take the class, and next 1 hour, I will be giving you the task. If you check your WhatsApp group, I have shared the workbook task of week 3 and 4. So week 2 is left, right? So sometime I give you week 2. Why? Because week 2 is of first unit. So we didn't get the time to complete the week 2. Why? Because you got so many holidays and we are short of syllabus coverage. So we skip that. I shared week 2 also with you, and I give you enough time for you to complete that, right? But week 3 and week 4, week 3 you should complete today. Week 4, as much you can do in that time, you do it, and I give you time till the evening to upload your week 3 and week 4. So the same rule you should follow. Solve the week 3 and week 4 in that document only. On top of it, you add your roll number and your name, and you upload the same thing in the drive link, which I will share, right? And for running notes also, I will share the drive link. In the last class only, I thought of sharing, but it got skipped somewhere, right? So today I will share two links with you, one for running notes and other for the week 3 and week 4 assignment, workbook assignment, right? So that is the thing I want to tell you. Then coming to this basic concept, scheduling criteria and scheduling algorithms, right? So coming to the objectives of this chapter, to introduce CPU scheduling, which is the basic for multi-programmed operating system. We all know that where we require the scheduling queues and all, when we are using the multi-programming. That means when we are giving multiple jobs to the CPU, right? So to keep the CPU busy all the time, we are using multi-programming, right? So if one job is waiting for IO, then immediately the other job will be given to the CPU. So who are going to do it? The short-term scheduler will take the job to the CPU, right? Yes or no? So to describe that is about the thing. Then to describe various CPU scheduling algorithms, right? So in this chapter, we are going to discuss about the various CPU scheduling algorithms also, right? Then to discuss evaluation criteria for selecting a CPU scheduling for a particular system. So for what type of system, which type of scheduling algorithm we are supposed to choose, right? So that thing we will discuss here, right? So coming to this basic concepts. So what is the basic concept of CPU scheduling is you have to maximize the CPU utilization, yes or no? Right? You have to choose the scheduling algorithm in such a way that it should keep the CPU busy all the time. And we should make sure that whenever we are taking a process, that process should have equal number of CPU cycles and burst cycles, not equally, but almost half. It should not be completely CPU dependent. It should not be completely IO dependent, right? So we have to make sure that whenever you are taking a process, that process will have the sequence of CPU and IO burst cycles, right? And then this CPU burst distribution. So distributing your CPU among the processes, right? So this is the basic idea of your CPU scheduling, right? So we all know that all our systems are single processor systems only. That means only one process can run in the system at a time. Yes or no? Right? And other process must wait for the CPU, right? Yes or no? If one job is getting executed in the CPU, all the other jobs should wait for the CPU, right? Once it gets free, only the other job will be given to the CPU, right? So when CPU will become idle, when that process requires any IO operation, right? Then that IO operation for your currently running process will wait for the IO to complete. At the time, we will be giving the CPU the other process, right? Now coming to the concepts of CPU scheduling, right? So in this, we mainly discuss about 4 things, under this concepts of CPU scheduling, right? So we discuss about CPU IO burst cycle. Under the concepts of CPU scheduling, we will be learning four things. What is that is CPU IO burst cycle, CPU scheduler, preemptive scheduling, and dispatcher. Right? We are going to learn about the 4 things. One is CPU IO burst cycle, CPU scheduler, preemptive scheduling, and dispatcher. So what do you mean by CPU IO burst cycle, right? So process execution consisting of cycles of CPU execution and IO wait. Right? When you take any process, the process execution consisting of a cycle of CPU execution and IO wait. So if you take any process, remember the process starts with CPU burst and ends with CPU burst. Sorry. Let me close this. Right? So if you take any process, your process starts with CPU burst and ends with CPU burst. Then that CPU burst followed by IO burst and again followed by CPU followed by IO. That in that way your process will get executed, right? So why you require CPU burst for starting the process? Because your program has to be loaded. Yes or no? Your program has to be loaded into the memory, right? From there, your program will get executed. Yes or no? So that loading process will be taken care by the operating system. So what operating system will do is, first it will take the process and it will keep in the CPU. So for that, you require CPU. Then in the middle, that means for reading a file, it requires the IO. So it waits for the IO, that is IO burst. After that, store increment index, something it is happening after doing that read file, then it requires write file. So the store increment and index, for these things, again it requires CPU. Then write file, that means it requires IO. Then load store, add store, that means some operations where it requires OS, and again read from the file, it requires IO. So that way your program needs set of IO burst and CPU burst. But remember here, your program starts with CPU burst and ends with the CPU burst, right? So what I can say with this is, the first cycle and the last cycle of the execution must be CPU burst. Clear for you all about the CPU and IO burst, right? So your program, yes, your program needs set of CPU cycles and IO cycles to complete the job, right? So first it starts with CPU, then it requires some IO for reading the file, and it requires CPU then to make the modifications on the file. Then you require IO to write the things in the file, like that. It requires set of CPU and IO burst cycles, right? Now coming to this, the next is CPU scheduler, right? So what CPU scheduler will do? Select from among the processes in the memory that are already ready to execute. So what the CPU scheduler will do is it will pick the jobs from the main memory. So what main memory contains? It contains all the jobs that are ready to be executed, right? So what the scheduler will do? It will pick the job from the main memory and it will allocate the CPU to one of them, right? So one job it will pick and it will give to the CPU, right? So when this CPU scheduling decisions takes place in your process, right? So when the CPU scheduler will come into the picture when your process is running. One is switches from running to waiting. That means when a current running process is switching to waiting state, that means it is waiting for IO, then CPU scheduler, what it has to do? It has to pick one more job from the main memory to give it to the CPU. Why? Because the process which is running in the CPU is going to waiting state to get some IO to be done, right? And second case where a process switches from ready to ready, when a process switches from running to ready state, right? When a process is switches from running to ready, when it will move from running to ready, when CPU got interrupted. When CPU got interrupted, right? Then a running process will be taken out of the CPU and it will be moved to the ready state, right? And the third one, switching from waiting to ready. So your process is completed with IO operation and it is moving to the ready state. It will go to ready state to get the CPU back. Fourth one, when your process terminates. So when a currently running process in the CPU terminates, the scheduler has to give one more job to the CPU. So CPU scheduling decisions may take place when a process is doing these four things, right? So here 1 and 4 are non-preemptive, the others are preemptive. What do you mean by preemptive? Taking a job forcibly from the CPU. So when 1 and 4 are when 1 and 4 are doing or where they are happening, right? The process should not be taken out of the CPU. That is why I'm calling they are non-preemptive, right? 1 and 4 means what? When a process is running to waiting state, when a process is switching from running to waiting state, at the time you cannot stop your job going into the waiting state. You cannot, right? And 4 is terminates. When a process is terminating, you cannot take out the process. These two are called non-preemptive, right? All others are preemptive. That means you can forcibly take the job from the CPU, right? So that is about the CPU scheduler and preemptive, non-preemptive, right? And what is dispatcher? So dispatcher it is nothing but your short-term scheduler only. What the dispatcher will do is, dispatcher module gives control of the CPU to the process selected by the short-term scheduler. You are getting me? Right? Dispatcher it will give the control of the CPU to the process which was selected by the short-term scheduler. So this dispatcher includes what? Context switching. You all know in the last class we discussed about the context switching, right? Then switching to user mode. That means whenever you are giving the process to the CPU, right? It has to be changed from system mode to the user mode, right? So that means from the OS, the control will be given to the process now, right? The user will do the things. So that is this switching to user mode. Then jumping to the proper location in the user program to restart the program. So whenever you are loading the program, that program has to be executed, right? Then what the dispatcher will do is, it will jump to the location of that user program and it will update the next instruction to be executed like that. So that to make the program execution possible, right? And then what is this dispatch latency? the time taken by the dispatcher, right, to stop one process and start the another process running. That is called dispatch latency. This is, you please remember, right? Dispatch latency. So to stop one process and to start the another process, the time required, right, to do this job by the dispatcher is called dispatch latency, right? So this is clear now about all these things, right? So if you take the concepts of CPU scheduling, it involves CPU IO burst cycle. We discussed that. Then CPU scheduler. This also we discussed. Then preemptive scheduling. Right? We will see. There we have in the scheduling algorithms we have some preemptive algorithms and we have some non-preemptive algorithms. Right? So we will see them. There you will understand what do you mean by preemptive and non-preemptive. Right? Then we discussed about the dispatcher. Now coming to this CPU scheduling criteria, right? So what is the criteria of the CPU scheduling algorithms is CPU utilization. That means you have to maximize the CPU. That means you keep the CPU as busy as possible, right? Then you have to increase the throughput. What do you mean by increase the throughput is the number of jobs that complete their execution per time unit, right? You have to know that. What do you mean by throughput? The definition of throughput is number of processes that complete their execution per time unit. For 1 second, how many jobs are getting executed? That is throughput. So to get the better scheduling algorithm, that should be increasing the throughput. That should maximize the CPU utilization. What is turnaround time is the total time required for a process to complete its job. It includes waiting time also. Waiting time plus execution time is called turnaround time. Remember, right? All these terms are very, very important for scheduling algorithms. Turnaround time is amount of time to execute a particular process, right? What is waiting time? Amount of time a process has been waiting in the ready queue. That means how much time it is waiting in the main memory to get the job done, right? Or else how much time it is waiting for the IO. All these will be included in the waiting time. So what is response time? Amount of time takes from when a request was submitted until the first response is produced. First response only, not the output. So this response time we will consider in the time sharing environment. Why? Because in the time sharing environment, we will consider everything in terms of the time, right? For each job, we will give some amount of time. So here in the time sharing environment, right, the time taken for the first respond from the time where you are giving the request, right? So these are the different terms we should be using in this scheduling algorithms, right? All this comes under scheduling criteria. Next to scheduling algorithm optimization criteria. So when you can say a scheduling algorithm is optimized, when you can say the algorithm is best, right? So when it is giving you the maximum CPU utilization. So when the algorithm is using your CPU maximum, right? So maximum we can consider in the range of 0 to 100 and for the best system we can say it is in between 40 to 80. So if 40 to 90, sorry. So when your CPU is utilized for 90%, right? In the real time, then you can say that is the best algorithm, which is giving you the maximum CPU utilization, right? So max throughput, as I told you, it should maximize the throughput. That means it should be able to execute more number of jobs in a given amount of time. For 1 second, it should complete maximum amount of jobs, right? Minimum turnaround time. So it should take minimum time for a job to complete its job. The total time, right? And minimum waiting time. The job should have minimum waiting time and minimum response time. So these are the scheduling algorithms optimization criteria. It should maximize the CPU utilization, maximize the throughput, minimize turnaround time, minimize waiting time, minimum response time, right? So now, please tell me the roll number for 56L. Roll number 56L. Just respond. 56L. Yeah. Please tell me what is turnaround time? What is turnaround time? Make it fast. Amount of time for execution process. Waiting time plus execution time. Okay, very good, right? So the total time spent by a process to complete its task, to complete its job, right? That is what turnaround time. Very good. Yes. Now coming to this, let's start with the CPU scheduling algorithms, right? Let's start with the. So I'm using the board. I'm using for the first time, my handwriting may not be good on the board, but I try to write better, right? So if you take the CPU, oh sorry. Can you able to see my board? Yeah, I will go slow. Can you able to see my board? Yeah, okay. So we have some set of CPU scheduling algorithms, right? So we will try to see them one by one, right? So the first one, I can call it as first come, first serve, FCFS, right? The first one is FCFS. The second one is shortest job first. The first one is first come, first serve. The second one is shortest job first. The third one is priority scheduling. The third one is priority scheduling. The fourth one I can call round robin scheduling. Fifth, we have multi-level queuing scheduling. Multi-level queuing scheduling. And the last we have multi-level feedback queuing scheduling, or queue scheduling, you can say, right? So we have some set of algorithms here. Let's start with first come, first serve, right? So you can put the subheading as CPU scheduling algorithms, right? So here the CPU scheduling deals with the problem of deciding which of the processes in the ready queue is to be allocated to the CPU. Right? What the scheduling algorithms will do is, CPU scheduling deals with the problem of deciding which of the processes in the ready queue is to be allocated the CPU, right? So we have different scheduling algorithms, which I given here, like first come, first serve, shortest job first, priority, round robin, right? And multi-level queue scheduling and multi-level feedback queue scheduling. So here we will be using a chart, Gantt chart, Gantt. I can call it as Gantt. I can call it as Gantt chart, right? So this Gantt chart is nothing but it is a bar chart that is used to illustrate a particular schedule, including the start and end times of each of the particular processes, right? I am using a bar chart here, like this I will be using, right? So here with this chart, what I do is, This chart is used to illustrate, so to better understand you how the scheduling can be done, which includes the starting time and the ending time of the processes, right? So let's start with first come first serve, right? So in FCFS, the process that requests the CPU first is allocated to the CPU first. You're getting me? Which job is requesting the CPU first? Then the CPU is allocated to that job first. So it is a non-preemptive scheduling, ma. That means when a job is given to the CPU, until unless the job itself comes out of the CPU, you cannot take the process out of the CPU. It is non-preemptive, right? So that is what. Once the job has been allocated to the process, it keeps the CPU until it releases the CPU. That is called non-preemptive, right? And FCFS can be implemented using FIFO queue. First in, first out. First come, first serve, first in, first out, same and so because FIFO is the technology that is used in the queues, so I can say FCFS can be implemented by using FIFO queues. So when a process enters the ready queue, right, its PCB is linked onto the tail of the queue, right? So you will be having the queue like this, right? Yes or no? This is the end, this is tail. So whenever any process is entering, that will be linked to the queue like this, right, at the tail. When the CPU is free, it is allocated to the process at the head of the queue. So when the jobs will be entering this way, but when the CPU gets free, the jobs will be given from its head to the CPU, right? So this is how the process FCFS scheduling will be done, right? So once the job is given to the CPU, it will be taken out of the queue, right? So I will take a simple example to explain you how first come first serve scheduling will work, right? So here I am giving like it is a multi-programming, no? Let's consider there 3 processes are ready to get executed. I have the processes like P1, P2, P3, right? So 1, 2, 3 means here I am giving you the time, right? Here I am giving you the time for each process, and this numbers 1, 2, 3 will tell you that which job requested the CPU first. The numbers will tell you P1 means P1 first requested the CPU. So P1 will be given to the processor first. Then P2 requested. Then P2 will be given the processor. P3 requested. Then P3 will be given. Next P4. Like that, the processes in order how they requested the CPU will be given to the CPU. Right? Now consider P1 requires the time of 24 microseconds you take. P2 requires the time of 3, P3 requires the time of 3. Now, which job will be given CPU first here? Which job will be given CPU first? Please respond. P1, right? Now, so as I told you, this Gantt chart will give you the starting and ending times of the processes also. So initially there is no processes in the CPU, and at the time of 0, right, P1 requested, so P1 will be given the CPU. So how much time does P1 requires? You can give in terms of numbers. How much time P1 requires? Right, so it is spending 24 milliseconds of the time in the CPU. That is the ending time of P1 is 24. Right? Next, which job will be given? P2. Right? So when P2 is entering into the CPU at the time of 24, when it will get end? How much time it required? 3. When it will get end? 27. Wow, very good. Right? It is entering at 24 and ending at 27. Now the job P3 will be given. Right? So when it is going to end, it requires again 3. It will end at 30. Am I correct? Yes, very good. Now we are supposed to calculate the turnaround time and waiting time for each process. And at the end, you are supposed to calculate average turnaround time and average waiting time. So what is the turnaround time? The total time spent for the process execution. Now you tell me for process P1, what is the turnaround time? 24. Very good. What is the turnaround time for P2? 27, not 3. Why? Because turnaround time includes waiting time also. Your second process waited for 24 milliseconds to get the CPU time. It entered at 0 only, right? All entered at the same time, right? But it waited 24 milliseconds to get the CPU. And it requires only 3 seconds to complete the job. What is the total turnaround time here? 27, right? And what is the total turnaround time for P3? Yes, very good. So now I am writing the turnaround times here. For this, it is 24. For this, it is 27. For this, it is 30. Right? You're getting me, no? So this I can say like the turnaround time will be the ending time minus the, tell me, minus the arrival time. So here we have the arrival time also one field. When the arrival time was not mentioned in the problem, consider the arrival time for all the processes as 0. If arrival time is given, your turnaround time and the waiting time will be different, right? But initially I am explaining you with the arrival time 0, right? So turnaround time, I can write the formula as end time minus arrival time. Ending time minus arrival time, right? Then here waiting time means starting time minus arrival time, right? When it arrived and when the job started. The between time is the waiting time. So I can say the waiting time is nothing but the starting time minus arrival time. Now you quickly tell me what is the waiting time for P1? What is the waiting time? 0. For P2? 24. Very good. For P3? Yes. That means for this it is 0, for this 24, for this 27. Now you calculate the total waiting time and divided by 3. The total waiting time divided by number of processes is give you the average waiting time. Now you tell me average waiting time and average turnaround time. Calculate and tell me what is the average turnaround time? 27. Average waiting time? Yes, very good, right? So it is 17 and it is 27. Right? But we have some limitations with the first come, first serve. What are those? I can say first come, first serve is suffering with convoy effect. It is suffering with convoy effect, right? Yes, ma, give me some time. Getting the urgent call, I think. Yes, ma, give me 2 minutes. I will be back. Yeah. Your first come, am I audible no? Your first come, first serve is suffering with the convoy effect. So what do you mean by this convoy effect is, convoy effect means when a big process is executing in the CPU, all the small processes must have to wait till until the big process completes its execution. That is meant by convoy effect. See, because here the first job is very big process with the service time. So that 24, the time I given now, 24:33, that is called service time or burst time, right? You can call it as service time or burst time, right? So because the first process is having 24, that is, it is the big process. Even though the job 2 and job 3 requires only 3 milliseconds of time, they has to wait until your first job, the big job completes. So that is called convoy effect, right? So this will affect the performance of the system, definitely, because the first process is big process. Here the turnaround time and the waiting time are very high. So now to better understand this, now consider the jobs here like this. Like here I will write. P1 is having 3, P2 having 3, P3 having 24. Now, for this problem, you calculate the total turnaround time and the waiting time. You take this job, right, as P1 equal to 3, P2 equal to 3, P3 equal to 24, and you calculate total turnaround time and the average waiting time and the average turnaround time, and do let me know, so that you will better understand what do you mean by this convoy effect, how it is affecting the performance of your system. Please solve that problem in your running notes and do let me know. Yes. Average waiting time is 3. Average turnaround time is 13, correct? Only one person responded. What happened to the others? So that means here, see, the order of the jobs is affecting your system performance. Yes or no? Right? So when the FCFS fails, when the first job is the big process, right? So because The first job itself is the big process. The remaining all are waiting so much amount of time. So that is called convoy effect. This is clear now, right? So if you give the jobs in the other order, you decrease the turnaround time and waiting time, right? So what are the disadvantage of FCFS? Because FCFS is non-preemptive scheduling algorithm, right? It allows one process to keep CPU for long time, hence it is not suitable for time sharing systems. So that is the disadvantage with the first come, first serve. So this is clear for you all, the first come, first serve? Yes? Can we move to the other process algorithm? Shortest job first. Yes, okay. Sorry. Shortest job first. So with the name itself, it is telling you the shortest job first algorithm, right? So I can define the shortest job algorithm as when the CPU is available, it is assigned to the process that has the smallest next CPU burst. So if 4 jobs are waiting for the CPU, right? Then what this algorithm will do is it will pick the job with the smallest burst time. It will select the job with the smallest burst time and that will be given to the CPU. You got it? When the CPU is available, it is assigned to the process that has the smallest next CPU burst. Then here one more thing you should consider. Let's consider there are 4 jobs are waiting, right? And which is the small job that will be given to the CPU first now. And again there, the 2 jobs having the same amount of time. The 2 small jobs are having the same burst time, then first come first serve will be followed there. Then FCFS will be followed. So I give you a simple example here. So there are 4 processes with the burst 4, 6, 4, 8. So P1, P2, P3, P4, right? So here shortest jobs are P1, P3. So among which will be given first? P1. Why? Because here we are having 2 shortest jobs. When we have more than 1 jobs with the same shortest time, then first come first serve will be followed. Yes? Now, clear for you now, right? The next CPU bursts of 2 processes are the same. FCFS scheduling is used between those 2 processes, right? So shortest job first is also called as shortest next CPU burst algorithm. Shortest next CPU burst. Shortest next CPU burst algorithm. Shortest job first is also called as shortest next CPU burst algorithm. Because why we are calling it as SNCB is because this scheduling depends on the length of the next CPU burst of the process rather than its total length. Right? You're getting me, no? So let's take an example to understand this algorithm better. Here I am giving you 4 jobs P1, P2, P3, P4 with the burst time 6, 8, 7, 3. Can you calculate the average turnaround time and average waiting time? So before that, just to draw the Gantt chart. First, which job will be given first? Which job will be given first? P4. Very good. Next, P1. Then P3, and finally P2, right? So try to draw the Gantt chart. First, which job will be given? P4 will be given. So what is the service time for P4? 3. Then what will be given? P1, right? With the service time 6, 9. Then P3 will be given with the service time 7, that is 16. Then finally P4 will be given with the service time 8. So 16 plus 8, 24, right? So cross check your Gantt chart with this. If you are already drawn on your running notes, cross check with your Gantt chart. Now calculate the average time. See, in most of your exams, right? They may not ask you to do turnaround time and waiting time as well. We mainly concentrate on waiting time. So if they ask you to do only the waiting time, only do the waiting time. Right? So average waiting time here is 9. Are you sure? 9.3. 3. Let me calculate. Everyone got the same answer? See, waiting time for the P1, for P1, it is 3. For the last one is P2, no? This is P2, not P4, P2, right? So for P2, for P2 it is 16. For P3, it is 9. For P4, it is 0. So 3 plus 16 plus 9 by 4. How much? Seven. Yes, ma'am. 7 is correct. But Anil Kumar, how you got 9, ma? You divided with 3 instead of 4, right? I guess. Yeah, you are supposed to divide by number of jobs. Here we are having 4 jobs, no? Now clear for you, Anil? Yeah. So what is the average waiting time we got here? As 7 milliseconds. So you still have the problem with SGF, understood? Do let me know, clear? Please respond, ma, the remaining. Is it clear for you all? Yes. Now, again here this SJF is also having some problem. What is that? Here, irrespective of the order they entered, right? The scheduler is picking the smallest job. Yes or no? Means the longest job will be continuously waiting. It is suffering with the starvation problem, I can say. So the longest job will never get the chance. You're getting no? Right? The longest job will never get the chance. That is the difficulty with the SJF, right? So I have some points to discuss to tell you about the SJF, right? So for the previous algorithm, what we discussed, right? You got the average time as 7 milliseconds, right? So it gives the minimum average time for a given set of processes. Then you can say SJF is optimal, right? So why we are going to decrease the average waiting time is by giving the shortest jobs to the CPU, right? Because we are giving only the shortest jobs. The shortest jobs will be completing their task, right? Very fast, right? So the waiting time we are decreasing. But the difficulty is knowing the length of the next CPU burst with the short-term scheduler. There is no way to know the length of the next CPU burst, right? It is not implemented particularly. So we have one more algorithm called shortest remaining time first, SRTF, right? So I can say SRTF is the preemptive SJF, right? That means in the SJF, you can take out the process from the CPU forcibly. That is the reason I can tell it is the preemptive SJF algorithm. That means, so this algorithm we will see in the next class, right? So you can take 5 minutes break, then you can start doing your task which I shared in your WhatsApp group, right? So 1 hour time I am giving you. You try to complete that, and now I will share the drive link with you, right? Let me create the drive link for your running notes as well for the week 3 and week 4 assignment.